Greetings, my magnificent ones. Sue Paulson here in the Magnificence Lab. I've been mulling over lately all about safety. Why? Because I've been challenged to get out of my comfort zone, and I'm a little bit fearful. So I got thinking about the dangers of safety. So I want to talk about that today and challenge you in ways that maybe you've never been challenged before. So, if you've watched me on my YouTube channel or other places in the Magnificence Lab, that I firmly believe that when we can open up to embrace and share our magnificence to everyone whose path we cross, then the world will change, and it will change, I think, for significantly for the better. But of course, in exploring that, in opening up, so you need to know that I have played small for most of my life because I was taught that keep your head down and don't get too excited and don't show all who you are, because that will put you at risk. That was the message that I got growing up. Now, I was kind of an exuberant kid, and I probably drove my parents wild because of my nature. But there were times in my growing up where I realized, ooh, it might not be that safe to show all who I am. So I began the very painful process of stuffing myself into a box so that I'd have a safe little structure that would be acceptable. And people would want to be around me, they would like me, they would, all those things that we don't even realize we're doing as kids, but we want to be cared for. We want the approval of those we look up to or those who are responsible for us. And so that old reptilian survival thing operates very, very strongly. The challenge is, though, there's an awful lot of suffering in all of that. And I experienced it. There were times when it took tremendous amounts of energy to keep myself contained, to think about what I was going to say before I spoke it, to um, avidly watch people around me for clues as to what would be acceptable. It was exhausting. And of course, I couldn't, because didn't feel safe to be who I was. It was almost impossible for anybody else to understand who I was. So, in keeping that small, even though it felt safe, it was really hard on my whole being, really, really hard on my whole being. And what would happen, because on the other hand, I disliked silence. So if I was in a classroom, I wasn't going to be the first one to put up my hand because that could be dangerous. And so I didn't put up my hand, but no one else would either. And the silence would stretch. And of course, smart teachers wait for the silence. Like they wait for somebody to break, right? Well, I'd nearly always be the first one to break. I couldn't stand the silence, so I'd blurt out some answer. And I mean, usually I had the right answer. And so there was nothing to fear in speaking out except what was inside me that taught me, okay, this is not safe to say anything. It's not safe to put yourself out there. There, that way there are dragons. So I was fearful, and I thought, oh, okay. So I, as I grew, I did get to a point in my life where I started breaking out a little more and coming out of my shell and being more of who I was, but I was always mindful of who was around me. So if I felt reasonably safe around them, then I say something and participate and be more of who I was. But if I was in an environment that was new, I wouldn't. So there's an old phrase that I love that came out of the past. I don't even know where it came from. It was called, "A rut is simply a grave with the ends kicked out." And when I heard that, I I was shocked. I thought, "Oh my goodness." And because I realized that staying safe or finding ways to keep myself safe and small is like a rut. And eventually it feels so confining and I felt so trapped that there was more of a tendency to dig deeper and go further into my rut. Well, 6 feet down, there's your grave right there. And it was soul destroying for me. So I look at it now and I think, okay, what is it that we're meant to be, do, and have in our society? Well, mission possible, I think, as I've been experimenting with magnificence, is to be all of who we are and to just let that light shine, because the contribution that makes not only to our own psyche but to the rest of the world is astounding when we allow and embrace all that we are. We're just far more than this physical body that we have. We're far more than our ego. We're far more than our sum total of beliefs and wherever we're going. And the goals that we have, or the money that we make, or the careers that we choose, we're way, 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 way more than that. But society teaches us, or maybe certain loved ones have taught us, oh, no, no, just play small, just be safe. That's the most important thing. So look before you leap, and think things through before you make any decisions about this, that, or the other thing. And if you get a big opportunity, yeah, well, I don't know if you want to be that big. So you see the madness in all of that, right? That these old thinking patterns, these beliefs that initially are other people's beliefs, they're not even ours. When we come into this world as brand new babes, it's a clean slate, but stuff filters in from what we observe, what we hear, what we learn, what people tell us. And in our people pleasing desire to be cherished and loved and approved of and safe and all of those other kinds of things, it's not that difficult to fall into the pattern of, oh, well, they're bigger than me, they're stronger than me, they're older than me, they must know, they're smarter than me, they must know better than I know what works. So I'll just fall in and go along to get along. I have a few gold medals in that category, to go along to get along. I'm not sure it served me. And I'm not sure it serves you. In fact, I'm pretty sure it doesn't, because what it does is playing that safe and that small stifles our very essence. And the creativity, the contribution that we could make if we didn't do that is considerably larger. So let's face it, life is an experiment. Some of our experiments, in fact, probably most of our experiments, fall flat or plain and simple fail. But what if, I mean, we put in the effort and put in the effort and put in the effort, and, and I remember the old story about people who are highly optimistic, and I'm one of them. I'm a highly optimistic person, and so the highly optimistic person goes to the barn and sees that it's full of manure. Well, of course, other personality types might look for the shovel and say, okay, let's get this shit out of here. The highly optimistic person as I said, I'm one of those, looks and says, "Well, there must be a pony in here somewhere." And so you start digging, looking for the pony, like there's a benefit in all of this. Well, I think that's what happens when we look at this seed of magnificence, at least for me, when the concept was presented, this idea that I, as a being in human form, am magnificent. It was a big concept, and I love the idea, but I couldn't see it for myself. Like I wrestled with it for a long time, and partly that was because I played it safe for so long. I played it small for so long. It was difficult to imagine that there was far more for me out there than I had ever believed possible. So in the digging for the truth of that, the essence of that, one of the things I needed to do was examine my old beliefs, my old patterns, my old ways of behavior that had kept me safe, that had kept me in this little structure. Now, Sue, just don't go out of the box, except that life would happen. And some of me that was that exuberant, magnificent part would leak out, and I'd be horrified by that and say, "Oh no, no, back in the box, back in the box, back in the box." And I'd do my best to rein myself in, except that each time I'd attempt to rein myself in, somebody would make a comment and said, "Oh, Sue, I loved what you said." Or they'd say, "That was so funny." And there was no criticism coming from them. It was my own criticism of myself that was getting in the way. That, "Oh, no, no, you can't do that. That smarten up. That never do that again. That's very risky." That, oh boy. And so my inner critic was beating away at me, wanting to force me back into the box. Get in that box. Look out. Don't be putting yourself out there, because you don't know what could happen and you're vulnerable. Well, of course, if we're looking at magnificence as mission possible, it's going to require a big letting go. Now, it doesn't have to be all at once, but gradually, 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 if that's what works for you, little by little by little. That's how I did it. I'm a calculated risk taker. I poke around in the bushes with a stick before I think going in there. But I do eventually get into the bushes. And so if that works for you, hey, whatever works for you. I'm not telling you how to do this. I'm just suggesting that it's important to feel your way along, to say, okay, if this is what I want, if I know that I'm far more than I'm portraying myself to be in this moment, if I know that it would really benefit me in my heart of hearts to allow myself to shine, then of course there's going to be some effort required in doing that. And part of that is examining all of these old beliefs, all these old patterns, all these old things that are obstacles, I guess you could call them, that are getting in the way. And some of them are old experiences that something bad happened, and but we were little and we didn't have the power to do anything about it. But we can re-examine that in our adult state and say, okay, but I'm not that person anymore. I've changed. I've grown. I'm different now. So how in my current state can I examine that whole issue and then relegate it to the past? Well, that was then. How am I going to move forward now? Because it is a grow or die kind of a situation. You can die to your new possibilities, or you can die to your old self. Well, I'm choosing to die to my old self. I'm choosing to let go of, to forgive, to have compassion for the me that used to put me in that little box to stay safe. the me that wouldn't put herself out there, and as a result, didn't get a contract or didn't move forward. When I used to work with accounting students, I was teaching them communication skills, and one big portion of that was public speaking. Well, you can imagine not very many accounting students enjoy the idea of getting up in front of a group. They would rather just work with their books, with their numbers on their computer, go away, don't bother me. But I told them, I said, look, you can run, but you can't hide. In our society these days, you are going to be expected to get up in front of people and say something, whether it's on a Zoom call, whether it's face to face, doesn't really matter. Your expertise and attention is going to be called to, and to say, okay, what are you going to say? Well, if you were like many of my students said, oh, well, I skipped all those public speaking classes in high school, and I took a D so that I didn't have to push myself out of my comfort zone. The terror loomed so large for them, it was as if they were going to die when they got up in front of people. Well, and I know that you don't die when you get up in front of people. I mean, it's so well, and maybe there's one person in the whole world that happened to, but for the most part, it might feel like dying because it's a bit terrifying to get up in front of a group of people and not know what to say or freeze or whatever. So the fear is it's valid, but it isn't real, and it isn't in that instance particularly life threatening. And so then you go, okay, well, how do I do this then? And how do I put myself out of my comfort zone far enough that I can rise to the challenge? I can do whatever. And so I recommend to people, look, well, take a class on public speaking, like learn how to deal with whatever fears come up. You'll find that in the first, and I watch this with my students, in the first 30 seconds to a minute, I watched that time when they flipped over from being terrified inside themselves to focusing on the audience. The second that they focused on what they wanted to tell the audience, they just relaxed, just instantly. And I could see it. I videoed it, and I'd show people the playback, and I'd say, see, right there, that's when you forgot about yourself, and you were there to put your attention on whoever you were speaking to. And it's that moment that we start to relax, and then we get to grow. And of course, just as one bad experience added to another, added to another, added to another, can take us down that path of well, life just gets worse and worse and worse, and pretty soon you're all gloom and doom, and nothing is ever going to be right in your world. Well, there is that path for sure. However, the other path, the opposite path, you add one small good experience to another, to another, to another, and to another, and pretty soon you go, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. I'm actually starting to enjoy this. I think I'm having a little bit of fun. And, somebody actually laughed at a joke I told, and they were listening so intently. And so, so it is as simple as that. It's so what are you going to feed in yourself? Now, um, the challenge with comfort zones is when we get out of our comfort zone and do something different and have some success, we do enter another comfort zone. And so it is going to be I'm not going to lie to you, it's going to be a continual challenge. If you want to continue to grow, if you want to continue to push the boundaries of all that you are, and it's magnificent, it is way bigger than you ever imagine, then you will create new comfort zones, new thresholds. An example I can think of is maybe I started out babysitting at 50 cents an hour. And to me that was good money. And then when I got a part-time job, they were paying me $1.50 an hour, and I'm going, "Whoa." So I adjusted to the new level of income, and then I kept adjusting to the new level of income. And they talk about, the thresholds of where you feel comfortable. And one of the reasons that people who win a whole bunch of cash in a lottery have real difficulty hanging on to it or adjusting to it, because it's so far beyond their threshold, so far beyond their comfort zone, that they panic, and they do everything in their power to get comfortable again. So there's the danger, right? When we do everything in our power to stay comfortable, that's when the world starts to close in. And I haven't found personally that staying in my comfort zone worked that well. It was far better for me to keep growing and expanding and say, okay, what more is there? I didn't have to do it at a rapid pace. You don't have to take on the whole world tomorrow and bust loose in a way that terrifies you to the depths of your soul. But you do need to take one small action and then another small action and then another small action, if that's more to your liking. I mean, let's face it, if I want to feel the freedom that is there, and jump out of a perfectly good airplane, trust me, I am not going to go without a parachute. I could, but that's way more risk than I'm willing to take on. So if you take a look at, okay, what can I, was just a little bit more than I can handle. I can handle this, no problem. But let's step outside that and say, well, what would be a little riskier? What's kind of terrifying, which is a little bit scary. And the second that you do that, then opportunities open up. And I remember, oh goodness, years ago, I was so admiring of these stand-up comedians, and well, how do they make people laugh like that? I can't even imagine how they have the braveness to do that, the courage to do that. And I had a bad experience as speaking in public at a particular event, where I was trying to be lighthearted and so on, because that's what they wanted. And it just fell so flat that I was miserable at the end of it. And I thought, oh, don't even pay me. I did such a poor job of this. And it it scared me, the idea of getting in front of people again, because I failed so miserably. And I was muttering to myself, I'm never putting myself in that position again. Except that I like being at the front of the room. And I'm thinking, I wonder if it's possible to be purposely funny. Like, there must be a system, there must be a pattern or something that I could learn that would move me forward in that arena. Well, just the very fact that I asked that question, I wonder if, then comes to my attention, there's this little stand-up comedy course that I could take through the public school system or whatever it was, adult learning. And I thought, oh, I can go and learn how to do this. So off I go to class. Unbeknownst to me, the goal of the class is to do 5 minutes of stand-up comedy on amateur night at a local comedy club. If I'd have known that before I signed up for the class, I would have not signed up for the class. But I'm in it. And I'm thinking, oh, well, I don't, it's optional. I don't have to do this if I don't want to, but I can learn in the meantime. And so I went through the class, and it was, I didn't get it. I didn't understand how to do this. And it was a little bit horrible. And I'd go home and I'd practice on my friends and they wouldn't laugh. And I'm going, I don't think I can do this. And I wanted to back out and not do the 5 minutes at the comedy club. But I thought, well, if I don't invite anybody I know, then they're all stranger, and they all have a drink. And so it'll probably be relatively safe, because they won't know who I am anyway. And once I leave, That'll be the end of it. And so surely I can do my best and at least try it. So I rose to the challenge, and that was probably the single most m- movement forward that I had ever experienced in my whole life. It was such a rewarding experience, partly because I was successful and people laughed. So that was such a relief. But for the most part, the biggest part of that was I faced a particular terror that I had, something that I was pretty sure I maybe couldn't do, and I overcame it. I worked through it. I threw myself way out of my comfort zone into an arena that I considered to be highly risky, and achieved what I set out to achieve. Now, did I go up there in a drunken stupor without any kind of preparation and then blab away? No, I didn't. I took a class. I learned week by week what made things work and what things didn't work. And so that for me took me and guided me along that path. And at the end of it, oh, the rewards were just astonishing for me. So, and I recommended that class to lots of people after the fact. I said, oh, look, if you've got a real fear around this, then go take this class, put yourself out there. And the ones that did, and two or three people that I knew actually did do that, they found it so meaningful and so helpful to them. So, but this is what's possible when we look at stopping this playing safe, saying, okay, I'm more than that. I'm worth more than that. What can I do that will give me those opportunities to press the boundaries, to knock down a little hole in that wall that I've put up that I thought was going to keep me safe? Well, maybe it's keeping me safe, but I'm not that happy. I'm not thriving. I'm just struggling and doing my best to survive, and looking over my shoulder to see if somebody's coming after me because I'm so fearful. So playing it safe is a dangerous, dangerous game in this life when, let's face it, there's very little that's predictable anymore. There's very little that we can count on except ourselves. We can count on us. We might need to learn how to do that. We might need to defy what anybody has ever told us about ourselves and say, no, you've got it wrong. I'm more than that. I'm bigger than that. I'm more magnificent than that. And then take some action so that you can prove that to yourself over and over and over again. And even if it's just baby steps, each baby step helps you climb to the top. So that's what I want to challenge you with today, my magnificent ones. Make sure that you look at that safety zone, that comfort zone that's so familiar to you, and challenge yourself. How can I push myself to do more, to be all who I am, to be the magnificence that I really have? I really have inside me, and that is me. And guess what? A magnificent life soon follows. Take good care, my dear magnificent ones. We'll see you next time.